Hi, everybody. We're here on the Caring View podcast today. We've got Sylvia Stevenson, Nicholas Kelly, and Daniel Mercier. And I'm Amrit Dhaliwal, the CEO and founder of Wallfinch. Thank you for joining me, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
I wonder if we could just start with a quick round robin, really quick introduction, a little bit about what you guys do and where you're based and so on. Sylvia, do you want to kickstart us?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. I'm Sylvia Stevenson. I'm Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Integrated Care 24. I specialize in changing diversity issues into business opportunities. It's really about working on the short to medium term strategies for organizations and really addressing the systemic inequalities that happen across the organizations, specifically looking at racial equality, gender equality, and generational diversity. So that's what I do.
Great, thank you very much. And Daniel.
Hi, morning all. I'm Daniel Mercier. I'm the head of social work and social care for an NHS trust, but I've worked in a number of NHS trusts, mostly in sort of the southwest, as a social worker actually. So maybe a slightly different slant today for me, because I'm really interested in the EDI agenda from a staffing point of view, certainly training restorative just culture in the past and sort of practice that through sort of HR type issues. But at the same time, as a social worker, I'm interested in, I suppose, is EDI inclusion certainly an access from a service user base point of view? So hopefully have a little bit of a discussion about how those sort of two things intertwine, if you like. But very good to be here this morning. Good.
Thank you very much. And Nick.
Thanks. Amazing two people before me. I'm Nicholas. I'm the CEO of Excella Respect and Excella Care. We are a domiciliary care provider in the social care space. We also have a technology company, so we build our own in-house technology. So we built our own rostering system, finance system, patient management system, where we can connect all records. My view is always around how this works for the patients and how things that can be better for service users that are using the service, but also how social care can actually, and social workers and care workers can be a fundamental part of the overall conversation. I think sometimes we're forgiven or forgotten and treated as a lesser workforce slavery, for a better word.
No, great, thank you. And for those that don't know, I'm Amrit, the CEO and founder of Wallfinch, which is a home care provider and a franchising business which franchises out our home care provision. And it's been operating a good few years. And I've known Daniel Mercier many years from when I was a home care franchisee in Oxfordshire, and Nicholas for the last, I think we met just before the pandemic, if I'm not wrong. And I was really happy to have been connected to Sylvia recently. We had a wonderful conversation, and actually, Sylvia, from the back of our conversation, I just wanted to kind of kickstart things from a more of a personal level, really, and just ask everybody, how have you found being, in high-powered positions or business owners and so on, and being from a diverse background? I mean, what's sort of been a little bit about your journey, and what's kind of got you here, and how's it helped or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks, Amrit. For me, it's never been about racial discrimination. I think a lot of people see people from Black minority ethnic groups and just assume that their story is always around, racial discrimination, inequalities in the system. I've been very fortunate to have a very good career, 18 years in Vodafone technology globally, so had a very, very privileged career and schooling. But I think my biggest challenge has been being the only one of me and my kind to be representing in the boardroom at senior positions. And I don't think people realize that just having one of that person, or one person with disability, or one person from the LGBT community, that's not diversity and inclusion. That actually takes a lot of courage to be your authentic self and to be the only one of your kind. So my challenge has really been around, courage to be myself, courage to roar enough or shout enough for the majority to hear, and courage to speak up without the fear of concussion. So I have got into this journey because I really believe that we have an opportunity now to address some of the systemic inequalities that exist and have existed. For me, if whatever we tolerate will never change. And that's why a lot of my work is at speaking to board members and senior leaders who have the privilege and authority to make those changes and to help them through that.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you very much for sharing that. That's really, it's very interesting. I think also you've got that kind of additional piece around, being from a minority group and also being a woman in a high-powered position. I imagine it's a kind of double whammy in many ways, isn't it? So, but that's really an interesting take. But and what about yourself, Nick? I mean, you've obviously been in business. Your family's been in business, but how has that kind of changed over the years, and what does the climate look like?
Well, I want to kind of touch on what Sylvia said previously before kind of setting up and running Respect and a group. I've worked in large media companies. I've worked in large tech companies, 2 or 3 of the large tech companies, I think, in the world. And I think what I found a lot of the time was being that only person there. At times, it felt like a little bit like tokenism, but also the point that Sylvia touched on is being your authentic self. There was times where I was in a situation where I would have probably now, being a lot older, been a lot more confident and mature, handled it very, very differently. I speak to a lot of people and younger people that are of the Black community or Asian or whatever, let's say of a color, and they're coming through and they're like, I've got to be myself. I've got to speak my mind. I've got to be strong and I've got to be confident. And I go, okay, cool. When I was doing that, I was told to shut up, sit there. You're lucky to be in the room. Shh. Be quiet because we will replace you with the next person that wants to do your job. And I think what I have seen though over time, it is changing. And I think it's amazing that now people are feeling like they can walk into a room and kick a chair and say, right, I'm here, I am me. But that wasn't how my journey. I mean, I've been working since, I think I started off in the military. I was in the Air Force. I went into work when I was probably about 21. And that whole time up until I probably think about a little before the pandemic, I always felt like, well, I was raised to be very, very quiet. I was raised to be a certain way. I was raised to be polite. So I was doing that. And what I realized is being polite, doing everything you were raised to be as a person of color to kind of excel in the world doesn't get you in those positions. So you have to be your own champion. You have to be your own person. But also you have to then go into a situation and call out and go, oh wait, I'm the only one here. Why?
Yeah.
Oh, so your version of diversity and inclusion is to put another person that looks exactly like you, but just a female, no offense to any women, on the board or on the team. But your product or you're aiming at people of color. So how do you guys really get that? Oh, and you have no one. You've never done any market research with those people. And you've got big brands that do something like that. If you look at a company like Cantu, which is probably one of the largest hair products in the world. If I remember rightly, and it might have changed, but they have no person of color on their board. Not one person, but they massively champion diversity and inclusion. What they've done is they've just gone, we're going to have 50-year-old white man and a 50-year-old white woman, and yet that's diversity and inclusion because we've added a woman. Oh, and this person might be from the LGBTQ plus community, so they count as well. But that's not really, because your product is aimed at people of color. But you have no one on that on the board. And I think that, for me, is where the fundamental problem has. Everyone keeps using this diversity and inclusion, and it's literally, oh, let's tick that box, let's tick that box. It's not a tick box exercise. Yeah. You can't. I also don't believe you can bring someone of color or a female or someone of any diverse group into an environment without changing the environment. If you've got a whole environment that's full of men and you put a woman into it, and you do not try and change the fundamentals of the business or the mechanics, what's going to happen is that woman's going to go in and go, I don't feel comfortable here. I don't feel safe, or I don't feel included, or I don't feel like I'm being heard. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave. You do that 2 or 3 times, and all of a sudden, at the end of the year, you go, well, you know what? We've tried hiring women, and it didn't really work. So we're just not going to push that initiative anymore. No, you didn't. You didn't do that. What you did is you basically got oil and water, oil and vinegar, and went, well, why didn't it blend together? Because I'm an idiot. And work out, and then wonder why it doesn't work. And I think that's what it is. People just go through you can go online and search diversity and inclusion forms, and you just see it's a checklist, and people just go through the checklist and think that's it.
And that is, you know, and thank you, because you've sort of surmised the issue really nicely. I think, you know, it's cultural shift and cultural change within organizations is what, you know, we need, as opposed to you know, tokenism, you know.
Yes.
So it's a really great way to put it. Thank you. And Dan, what about yourself? I mean, I know over the years we've spoken about this in different forms, actually. You know, there's the piece about color, there's a piece about sort of geographical issues and all of that.
Indeed, and I just wanted to pick up something that Nick said. Well, so much in what Sylvia and Nick said to unpack, and it's just really interesting stuff. And certainly just echoes the thoughts of the it being all about leadership and trying to diversify an organization, a team, a service where actually the culture is wrong and it isn't there and it hasn't got that right leadership. And you think about big public sector initiatives like the Met Police and why there are some things systemically that just can't change that. It's really difficult to say, right, we're going to do this, but sort of overarching leadership and philosophy doesn't change. So I think that's just a really important point to reflect upon, and I will be reflecting upon that. I think a little while, and yeah, I guess, and just to pick up as well, just again being the only person of colour in the room sometimes. So certainly I haven't had. I've been in public sector all of my life, so certainly I haven't had the experiences that all of you guys have actually. But certainly at middle and senior management positions, quite a common occurrence to be the only person of colour in the room. And actually, it's very interesting, you know, during pandemic, post-pandemic, when everybody's on Teams, so it's a little starker in terms of the facial recognition, I suppose, of the composition of the meeting. And you think, wow, okay, that's this means something really. There's something that we need to do. So yeah, I guess. One of the fundamental questions is around, why is it important? Apart from just creating an inclusive workforce, a better experience of employees, I suppose it's the bottom line sort of stuff, isn't it? And as you were sort of talking through the scenario relating to the hair brand, who I'm not familiar with their product or their brand, but clearly things aren't shifting and their corporate behavior isn't really impacting their bottom line as far as anybody can discern. And that's interesting, isn't it? So what does that mean about how we consume as a society and, you know, our sort of relationships to product and all of those sorts of things? And I think we are getting better at having closer relationships to product, which then does drive, of course, the corporate responsibility and makes good corporate citizens. So I always think about that circularity. You know, how can we sort of hold our corporations to account and how we consume and raise consciousness there? Social media is great for doing that, and therefore sort of forcing companies, if you like, to practice in a more inclusive and just be more representative, I suppose, in their brand and in their actual operations as well. So loads and loads to unpack there. But yeah, in terms of my experiences, I guess over the last few years, thought a little bit more about the NHS. And we are a multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic organisation. Very proud to be, as one of the many things I'm very proud to work for the NHS for. But there are, you know, massive inequalities, and every year we collect a lot of data on these unequal outcomes. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, because we collect a lot of data, yet the progress seems to be very, very, very slow. And there are some pockets of excellence in terms of practice, But there's a lot more to do. If you're a Black African person working in the NHS, then you're something between sort of 3 times and 7 times more likely to be subject to a formal disciplinary process, for example. So what are the causal mechanisms behind all of that? Again, there's a lot to unpack. This relates to other things such as people's sort of cultural and social capital, if you like, and other socioeconomic factors as well. So it does feel like really all the levers of state, if you like, the NHS, the police, the big sort of sector organisation, we all need to pull those levers of progress at the same time. Because otherwise, I think it's quite difficult for one organisation to think about inclusion and better experiences, really, of Black and minority ethnic people. So yeah, there's just a lot to unpack in even what's been said this first 10 minutes, I think.
I just wonder if I could just jump in there, Amrit.
Please.
A couple of things. So if we think about culture, and we certainly think about culture is formed over time, right? So you can have cultures that were very negative way back when. The leaders who have shaped that culture is gone, but they've left this little shadow, and people are still trying to fit visions and missions and visions into a culture that is not quite transformed. I'm a big believer in change starting with me, and that's what I focus on. That a lot of the times, I think the reason why we're not seeing change, especially at the top, going by what Nick and yourself, Daniel, have said, is because we're looking, when they think about cultural change, they go, oh, let's change the policy, let's change the procedure, let's change the organization, but they don't think, let's change me. Now, if you have a mobile phone and you get a new mobile phone, it comes with the features already kind of set in the background to on, so you automatically get stuff. So you've got to go into the back of your phone and deselect automatic downloads, for example, and then you make the choice. So for me, what I normally say is they need a diversity MOT. Check that you're ready for the diversity journey rather than assume that it's something that can be easily done. And I think it's because people are not aware of their biases. They're not looking at themselves. There's a lot of asymptomatic leaders out there enabling the inequality, but thinking it's got nothing to do with them. So I think it's really important. And just your point on business, why is it important? Number one, the Imperial College produced a report some time ago that says that by the London Imperial College, that by 2032, the population in England will increase by 8 million people. 3 million of them will be from Black minority ethnic groups. Okay, that by 2031, the number of people living to over 85 years and above will increase by 103%. That's generational diversity. And that London by 2031 will be 47% diverse. So why does it matter to businesses? It's not just about because it being the right thing to do. If organizations are doing well and people are engaged and they're making profit, who cares? Really is what they're saying. But they won't be able to recruit talent because the Gen Zs are coming in the organizations and they don't want to work for non-diverse, non-inclusive and companies that are not playing to the sustainable agenda. So they will find care assistants, call centers, those entry-level roles will see turnover because they need to get ahead of the curve now. We've got a small window to get it right. That's the message. Otherwise, from a business perspective, organizations will not be able to perform as excellently as they want to.
Yeah,
That's
I
super
agree with
interesting. Yeah, and actually, Nick, I mean, you're sort of quite well placed to kickstart us on the next question that I had, which was, what can we be doing in social care? You know, bear in mind that social care is operated largely by entrepreneurs, actually.
Yeah.
You know, so what can we be doing in social care to improve the level of diversity and equality? I mean, you know, I sort of look at social care and I think, well, actually, if we look at the kind of base level, the carer system, the entry level jobs, so much of that is diverse by, and maybe that's part of the sort of socioeconomic breakdown of the situation. But as you go further up the ranks, I mean, I go into rooms now, and Nick, I've joined you on panels and so on, and there's you and me and and a sea of white, and it's really interesting when we sort of look at that. What can we be doing as businesses that maybe that are led by non-diverse people? How do we do this? And same question to everyone else, but go ahead, Nick.
Well, I think it goes kind of back to what we said before. If you look at what you classify or what most people classify as diversity, is there a good mix of, say, of people in the room? But we don't always assume color is part of that diverse conversation. I previously worked for a massive company, and they had a diversity and inclusion team. And I was like, yes, it's amazing. I really want to be a part of this. Went on and realized it was just a bunch of women and people from differentialized whatever background. Not one person of color on that team. Anyway, but so back to Amrit's point, I think you're right. As you kind of, it's that scale. As at the bottom, it's very, very dark and brown, and as you go, it starts going a shade lighter, a shade lighter, a shade lighter, until you get to white. But then it's you got to remember, social care and mostly care is normally predominantly female until you get to really at the top, where it's always a white man. However you want to push it, it's always a white man at the top. But that, as I said, that gradient changes. I think what we need to do is look at those positions they're in and say, actually, why don't we hire somebody that represents the ground? Because you've got politicians, you've got people in power making policies, and not one of them has ever done a day of care in their life. Not one of them has ever worked as a social worker. Not one of them has ever worked in a hospital as a nurse. And yes, they might have gone, yes, but I've been a doctor, I've been a surgeon. Yes, but your lifestyle and your work is very different than a nurse that has to basically travel for 3 hours one way, 3 hours back, is eating one sandwich that they probably had. They've got probably 2 kids which they've had to get up, get ready, and drop off at an after school club or with a family member. Or in my example, my mum worked in healthcare since I think I was about 7. And I was being dropped off at school before the schoolkeeper was being dropped off. So I was sitting outside, being able to, because I was quite small, being able to fit through the gates of the school and sit on the steps of the school in the snow, in the rain, waiting for the schoolkeeper before the headmistress turned up. I was being dropped off at school at 6 o'clock in the morning because my mum had to travel to her first job of the day. And then I was being dropped off, and I was coming home and having to wait until she got back at 8, 9 o'clock when she finished her third job of the day. And I think that's what you see in the care space. But I can't understand what someone is feeling if you've never worked a day in that job. So why have so many people at the top that's so far removed, and then trying to make that work? And I think the only way we can do it is we need to start championing, bringing through people that have been on the ground through the system, and stop going, well, we need somebody that can really represent us. Okay, so then why does that person has to be white? When if you look at the makeup of the social care workforce or the nursing workforce, if you look at a hospital, most of the people that work in hospitals are probably from the Philippines or from Asia or Black communities. So why don't we have someone on the board that represents them? Why don't we have somebody that works? As a social care provider, when I work with local authorities, I'm encouraged, and even from a CQC perspective, I'm encouraged to have service users as a part of my annual meetings, as a part of my overall process of change in the business. So why do we not have the exact same at that top level? Why do we not have a care worker that's working 15 hours a day and actually probably just pops in to that 1 hour meeting and goes, right, I've got to wrap this up real quick because I don't have that time? And I think we have to, and I know Amit's just dropped off, but we have to start championing people that have done the work and bring them through. And we have to start pushing people. So when you get to the top, you go, okay, I can see that my voice is being heard. I can see that there's someone there that represents me. Because until we do that, all we're going to keep happening is someone go, I don't care about this because this is not talking or resonates for me.
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that, guys. All right, but I heard all of that. I was just sitting backstage there, and I think that's really interesting. It's something that I found. I mean, I actually was invited to my old high school, which is in West London in Hounslow. Hugely immigrant population there, and I was invited there last week to do a talk. And one of the things that I sort of was saying to these children was that you've got a superpower. You've got something that actually nobody else has got. You've got the ability to be a bridge, and if you can understand and learn the soft skills and just be allowed in the room, you could go much further because you can understand both sides of it. One of the things that I always find is that I really get the plight of the care worker when someone says to me, "Oh, look, I need £200 to fix that washing machine, and I'll pay you back over 6 months." I sort of understand that. I have friends that when I went to school, they had cards from the council so that they could eat. We're talking square meals here. So it's very different when you sort of sit in a room and you're talking to businesses doing 50, 60, 100 million pounds in revenue, and you've got people that have come over from the tech world and whatever that are running these businesses, and you think, well, okay, gosh, have you ever seen anyone that's actually been in that kind of strife? And I think so. I absolutely echo what you're saying there, Nick, and Dan and Sylvia. I don't know. I mean, what else would you guys add to that? And Sylvia, obviously, you spend quite a lot of time on that. But and I suppose there's different aspects of this. There's the government side of it from Dan, and maybe some of the private business side of it from Sylvia.
Did you want to go, Sylvia?
Please go ahead, because I spoke before. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So no, it's interesting. I think. Yeah. In terms of representation, sort of at the top table, as it were, certainly we don't quite have that right. I don't think in any government department or any sort of public sector organisation. I say there are some standout councils, for example, who do media very well. But I guess just thinking a little bit about what you were saying, Nick. And the representation of care workers and people with sort of that lived experience of being a care worker and the involvement in the running of an organisation. I think, firstly, that's sort of a powerful attribute to have as a leader, to be able to generally sort of empathise with people's situations and just get it. So there's a level of sort of genuineness, I suppose, that you can't buy or train into. You just have to have it through that experience. But I'm just thinking about the organisations I've worked for and how upwardly mobile, I suppose, the structures are. So how many people start at entry-level positions and then do end up in the more sort of senior or executive positions, and not many really. And as you say, maybe people coming from sort of a different background, not a direct sort of care delivery or intervention background, maybe a project management background, or somebody who sort of trained in leadership fairly early on at sort of post-grad level and have always had leadership positions in the public sector and the private sector. And they're generally, I suppose, the people who would be sitting at the top table in large public sector organisations. So there is something inwardly for the organisation to do and think about. And, there are structures and exercises, coaching, talent spotting, or all of those sorts of things that you can do to sort of nurture your workforce and create opportunities. So yeah, and I don't know what that feels like in the care sector. I mean, how many carers can come in as carers and sort of, I suppose, fulfill their potential, their talent, and how can they sort of be nurtured to have those more senior roles? I don't know. You guys are better placed than me to say whether that does happen or can happen.
It's hard. I think, sorry to cut you off, Sylvia. Sorry, but I think it's very, very hard, because you've got to assume a care worker is working sort of 40, 50 hours a week, right? They're definitely working a huge amount of time. Then you're saying to them, you have to study to elevate. You've got to do your level 3, your level 5, your level 7, your level 8. I mean, the more you got those levels, the more work you have to do. I mean, a level 5 and a level 7 or whatever it is is, I mean, Amrit can say he's both done it, but they are a wedge of work. I mean, I think I've got several degrees, and I pretty much was going through both of those and thinking there has to be a better way. And then you got to say on top of that, you got to remember most care workers, I mean, the average age of a care worker is what, 46, 47, I think upwards of. So that person's definitely going to have at least 1 to 2 children. Those 1 to 2 children maybe of still in school, but one of them's going to be in school, one of them might be post school. So you still got someone at home. So you've got to do your full-time work. You then have to come home and look after your family. And then you got to find a time to study. And even if your workplace is paying for all the studying, you've got to find a time to study. And you're looking at what, 10, 12 years to get through your 2, 3, 5 with looking after your family and working full time to get to that position. So now you started at the age of 45. So now you're 55, 60. But here's the thing, some 22-year-old has just gone, I've left Mackenzie, or I've just done my degree and I want to work in social care because I looked after a family member that I know more than everyone else, then gets that position over you because they can go the extra mile. They can work the hours you don't want to work. They can do the work. They can work until 7, 8 o'clock at night. They can put a deck together because, they've got the time. And you're like, I've still got to go home and cook and look after my family. Now you've been working in 15 years in the system. You are broken by the system.
Yeah.
And I've been in the system now, as I said, since I was 7, but technically working in this remit for about just under 10 years. And I'm somewhat so cynical now when I speak to people. Amrit knows this. I've gone past the whole, yeah, we can do this. This is going to be amazing. Now I'm just like, yeah, it's not going to change anything. I've been waiting for the green paper from the government for how long? I've been waiting for social care to be on the same understanding as the NHS. I've been trying to explain to people, even pre-pandemic, how important it is for a care worker seeing an individual in their own home. So why do I think things are going to change? And why do I think things are going to get any better? Because the system is set up for people, yes, go off, educate, get better. But what does that really mean when someone is coming in that's 10, 15 years younger than you? And it's not just in the social care sector. I think you see it in every sector where people say, go off and learn and educate. Someone younger will come in that can do what you rightly know you shouldn't be doing.
And Nick, I would say that, yeah, what you say is absolutely correct. And I do believe that it's challenging. There is no microwavable version of diversity and inclusion. There just isn't. Wouldn't it be great to put it in the microwave? And I think it's years of systemic inequality that goes back to history. But what I would say is the next generation coming in will not tolerate what previous generations are. They will not tolerate a lot of what we have. The Gen Zs are positive disruptors, and they are actually influencing a lot since coming into the workplace. Inclusive hiring has become the massive thing across NHS right now. How do we make sure that we're bias free? It's not about debiasing people, it's about debiasing the process. And I am seeing, because I work with a portfolio of NHS organizations, and I'm seeing where it's the how do we do this? Because we've talked for years about what we need to do, but breaking down the how has been difficult. One of the things that I know will shift, and it's quite a concern, is we don't have enough allies. We have a lot of people that say, I am an ally. Imagine you walking in a park and somebody falls in the water. A supporter will go, hey, somebody's drowned. Let me call 999. Help, somebody fall in the water. Hold on, help is coming. That's a supporter. They're doing all the stuff that looks good. An ally will jump in that river with their Gucci shoes on and grab you round the waist and pull you up. We haven't got enough allies in the system, people that are willing to have skin in the game, people that are willing to really hear and feel what people are going through. An ally needs to invest time consistently. Their social capital, fallout over breakfast because, there's debates going on and you're not going to, move away from your stance. They've got to, invest their emotional capital. Here's some stuff that is unpleasant. Here's some stuff that's going to upset them. But this is a lived experience of people. They've got to invest finance and they've got to educate themselves. And if we don't have that, that true allyship, what we have is the surface things. I absolutely agree and support affirmative actions. But trust me, there's nothing wrong with people from Black minority ethnic group. Why do we keep pushing them into mentoring and pushing them into coaching and pushing them into all of these things? Remove the barriers and let the best player win. So for me, I think we need more allies, and these allies come in the form of white men. They come in the form of people from sort of the majority cultures. They need to use their privilege. It's not just about white privilege. It's educational privilege. It's economic privilege. It's really feeling for people, understanding that if they don't get it right, there will be no future organization. It sounds quite, dramatic, but it's true. We need diversity to drive business in the future. So for me, in answer to your question, Amrit, we need more allies. We need people that truly are bought in to this rather than saying that they are.
And that is such an interesting point, actually, isn't it, Sylvia? Because I think, I often think about individual responsibility. I often think about, when I'm in a room, I'm representing people of color, Indians specifically, and so on. And I often think that when I'm talking, and so I'm not too political in my social media and so on, because you want to create a platform for the guys that are coming up the ranks, because I know how difficult, and well, we all know how difficult it is just to get a ticket to come into the room, forget about a seat at the table, and so I think that's really interesting to talk about allies, and it's about thinking, well, how do we actually go about doing that? We've got for the first time ever a prime minister that is a person of color, and forget about your political views. I think that is a really interesting thing that has happened here for the first time in the UK, and all of a sudden, it starts making you think. And I was talking to my nephews recently, and they're at university level and so on, and saying, well, okay, have you ever thought about politics? Because actually, yes, what we need is people that normally would be, of ethnic minorities, immigrants, and so on. Everyone's here on a mission, and they're saying, right, we need to earn, we need to, build revenue, and so on, and so. We're going on that, but actually, is it time within the communities that we start changing that mission and saying, well, actually, what we need is more centralized. We need a voice that actually means something, and if the ally isn't going to come from elsewhere, then we need to create that. And it's an interesting piece, I think. And I don't know if anyone else has got any other thoughts around that, and whether that individual responsibility compared to who else is out there. Because I think you're right, we've got tremendous amount of supporters, and the topic is finally on the agenda meaningfully. But as you've said, Sylvia, and I think if you remember when we spoke on the phone some months ago, it's really about the fact that it takes 10, 20 years to create that change. Yeah. And do we want to wait that? And what can we do today to kind of make some meaningful quick wins?
So I think that diversity, I see it as a lifelong relay marathon. Yeah. And how I advise people in organizations, in healthcare, you just got to define your lap. You just got to define the lap. The generations coming behind us will fight a different battle. They'll have to fight, but they'll fight a different battle. I think the best thing that any organization can do is there's two things. One, get cultural safety, which means that people feel able to speak up and they can talk about all the difficult things. If there's racism going on, there's a trend of patient on staff racism in the mental health community, and all of these different things. So we get people talking about it and have the policies around that are going to capture and look to address it. Difficult to have zero tolerance when you're supposed to provide care. But secondly, making sure that the culture, as soon as people come into the organization, they understand that we are a diverse and inclusive organization, which means that everyone should go through the basic cultural competence training. And if managers aren't talking about it, if it's not on your onboarding, if it's not a regular agenda on your meeting items, then nobody's going to really think that it's important. It's got to be that consistent small step. So when we look at it, it looks like a big mountain, but I would say to any organization, get culturally safe by making sure everyone, it's not just about training, it's about making sure managers talk about it, put it on your meeting agenda, create that two-way communication and do it consistently. You'd be surprised. I've done it globally. I'm doing it in the healthcare, NHS, and I'm telling you, it works, but we've got to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I think
it's
Sylvie,
a long-term investment. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
I think Sylvie, you touched on a point before where it is a long term. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon, and I think that analogy is probably the best way. But I think your point around the younger generation coming through are, unlike my generation and probably the generation above me, and maybe a couple of years below me, the generation now that's coming through are the ones that are actually saying, "I need that change." And actually, I think that's the really good point about it, is they're the ones saying, this does not represent, I'm not comfortable. And they are forcing the ones at the top. And I think, to your point, something you made a comment earlier on, if a company does not do that, they will fail. And I think that's the fundamental point of it, is because people now are changing the way they buy. They are changing the way they integrate with companies. And with the explosion of the internet, and I know we're going to say it's a very old term, I'm showing my age, but with the explosion of the internet, people are getting the information they need a lot easier and quicker. Absolutely. I can see the board of a company. I can see the team of a company. I can go on LinkedIn and see everyone that works in a company. Glassdoor. You know what I mean? You can do all these things, and there's like rate my boss or whatever it is. You can see all these things. So I think companies have to, and I think a lot of times where before companies were like, oh, it's too big. You can make small steps. But I think my point before was, if you're making those small steps, it has to be an organizational step. You cannot just say, let me just bring someone in and that's going to fix it. Let me just bring a diversity and inclusion lead in and it will fix it. But what we're going to do, we're going to clip their wings. We're not going to give them any support. We're not going to give them any budget. And all we're going to do is, every now and then, what we'll do is we'll roll out a cultural meal for everyone. It's Mexican Day. No, that's not diversity and inclusion. That is, I want to say tokenism at its best. But I think if you really believe in it, there is so much you can do, and it's just small things you can do.
And can I just jump in there, Nick, and say as well, we mustn't forget the impact of inequality and discrimination that it has on marginalized, underserved, underrepresented. I speak to a lot of senior leaders who say, oh, we've created the opportunity, but the outcomes are never the same. You know, when you've heard no, and you've been set up and you've failed, and it looks like you've failed every time, every opportunity you've gone through, there's always a reason why you were just not good enough. It does send a mental kind of mindset that people probably won't go for jobs, or they won't step forward unless they're in the safety of a program, because they've heard no all their lives. So there's a season where you are called forward and a season when you have to step forward. I'm seeing a lot of people from Black minority ethnic groups right now just not stepping forward because, to your point, Nick, they're a little bit cynical, quite rightly, because their lived experience has been, no, you've not been successful this time. We have to bear that in mind as well, the psychological impact it has on people when they've heard no for most of their lives.
And Dan, how have you found that in the NHS?
Yeah, sorry, you lost me for a couple of minutes there, but I got most of that. I think definitely parallels there, and I suppose I was thinking about the structural bits. So what we can do to design organizations that are inclusive. So that's not individual actions, it's the structure, and that's about strategy as well, isn't it? And I think if we're taking seriously EDI, then we need our leaders to design services that support inclusion. And as Nick said, you can't. I mean, having a role that has EDI against it, but not giving any resource or indeed any time tagged on to another sort of executive role or whatever, and that's not serious commitment. So there are things that you can do, and it's really interesting. A few years ago, there was an idea when thinking about the FTSE 100 companies, that in their sort of annual accounting report, that of course the public have access to, that there's a a salary ratio index. So the salary of the CEO, the ratio of the most poorly paid worker, and for that to be one of sort of the headline figures on the front of and you think, well, that's really interesting. And what's the EDI equivalent of that in terms of that visible accountability at a corporate level? That, I mean, that's powerful, because there's no hiding from that. That is powerful. So there's the structural stuff, but then the individual stuff. And Sylvia, I've agreed with pretty much everything you and Nick said. But I'd say the coaching bit, I'm interested in that, because you just touched on it there, where actually people's lived experience of work really impacts their expectation of it. So to be told no, to sort of be slightly on the inside, and therefore on the outside, not on the inside of conversations. You do think about where a lot of sort of corporate nurturing goes on. Whether, I mean, I'm going to throw out some cliches now, talk about discussions on the golf course and it, you know, but there are social forums, either in work or out work, that do facilitate development and therefore promotion and sort of ready people really for more senior positions. And that is just a reality of well, I say modern work. That has been reality of work for the last 200 years. So I suppose coaching and mentorship, they are structures that do provide that do slightly neutralize that, because they provide the same sort of stuff, the same sort of, yes, you can, and this is for you, and this is how you might approach it, and the feedback. It does provide that, but in a more sort of formalized way. And you can then target that, rather than it being subject to who just has the most chemistry in the office, because we have chemistry with people who have the sameness as us, don't we? So that is just an anti-EDI reality. So that is one way to sort of to neutralize that.
And I totally agree with you, Daniel, that there is room for coaching and mentoring, and I would always support that. I do a lot of pro bono executive coaching and mentoring, entry level. I do a lot of that because I think it's important, but it has to be authentic, like Nick says. So sometimes they hide behind, oh, how many people have gone through? So I would be interested in the stats that says how many people from Black minority ethnic groups, for example, if that's the long-term strategy to diversify the top, how many people have been through coaching and mentoring and moved on? I think the figures will surprise you. How many people have gone in through coaching and mentoring and have stepped up and kept going? And actually, I saw some figures. I won't mention the organization. I was quite surprised. So all of that effort, that's why Steve Barclay, the health secretary, oh, is this really important? It's because the authenticity isn't there. The true allyship isn't there. They just want to report on a thing. Oh, we've put 20 people through coaching and mentoring from Black minority ethnic groups. They've put it through. How many of those people are now sitting on the board, or how many people have got like a seat at the board or a companion? For me, when I do my work, I insist on sitting on the board. I'll give you your board report, but I'm going to come to your board meeting as well. Do you see what I mean? Right. So it's got to be authentic. Those programs have got to be authentic.
I had recently, we were exhibiting at the NEC for a franchise show, and the stark reality of it is the stereotype that's in everyone's minds. We met maybe over 100 people that we spoke to on the 2-day event, and I'm talking to a lot of these people, and I was there with three other people. Two of them were English gentlemen, white, middle class, early 50s, and I'm having a conversation with quite a lot of people, and the number of times someone said, "Yeah, I'm really interested. Cool, can I speak to the business owner, and who's the guy in charge, basically, right?" And you think, and obviously, okay, it's a bit of banter and whatever, but actually, the issue is far deeper, and I think it's because that approach is not seen out there. We're not on the boards, and we're not publicly out there, and actually the even when we're talking about it, it's not real and authentic often, and it's tick box exercises, as we've sort of said. But and so, guys, we're sort of closing in on time here, but I wonder if everyone could just maybe share one or two things that they think would be really useful things for organizations to do, things that they are easy to implement, and saying, well, either that's worked for me, or something that you think, well, okay, actually, this is fundamentally the direction to go. Even 2 items each. And just before we do close up, who wants to start here? Sylvia, maybe this
I
is
think I talked
up
so
your
much.
street.
I was
Give the
giving,
other chaps a minute.
yeah,
to think.
definitely, and these are 2 interventions that I'm rolling out currently now. Very easy. Get the boards and senior lead, get everyone culturally competent, and there's a 25 questions on a questionnaire. I designed it for senior leaders and boards where it might be uncomfortable for people to talk about diversity, because I do feel uncomfortable about it. And then once they complete it, immediately they get a 6-page report that starts. It's all around cultural competence. It's got cultural awareness, cultural diversity, cultural inclusion, cultural diligence, how we do business with diversity of thought, and then cultural confidence to lead diverse teams. And I would say the 2 things: roll out cultural competence. It's really easy to do. It starts conversations. Set one goal for everyone that's tracked and monitored. And secondly, get everyone talking about diversity in your organization. Put it as a regular item on your agenda. And that's the first stage, I think, awareness, so that people can then begin to really see that the organization is serious.
Great. Thank you very much. And
I'm
Dan,
going to echo.
Oh, so go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm going to echo what Sylvia just said. I think what you said, your 2 points are probably exactly what I was going to say. I think if I'm going to add to that one, I would say if you are somebody that is younger and you are working in a company, speak up, challenge norm, because if you are sub 25, you are in the right place to call that out, because your career is so young that it won't touch it. In your mind, you think, oh, if I say something, I will never be able to work again. You're fine. You're perfectly okay. And I think the other point is, we need allies, and allies can be from any color, from any background, but we need more allies to kind of say, okay, I do not feel comfortable with this. I think we need to speak up about this, because I think those 2 points are things that we really need to do, is challenge that norm and have those allies that are constantly saying, okay, is this right though? Are we doing this the right way?
Yeah, great, thank you. And Dan, over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that as well. Really, I'm just thinking it's so from a structural point of view as well, because I'm the bureaucrat in the room. I have to confess. So just thinking about how with Sylvia's test to test the level of cultural competence of leaders, you do think, goodness, if this is such a crucial, essential issue for leadership, then how have people gotten the positions without that as part of their skill set is a key thing. So again, I mean, from a corporate point of view, that those questions might actually form part of the recruitment process for for executive recruitment. So it's bringing those questions upstream, if you like, in the development of the people's careers, if you like. So and I think that in itself does generate conversations, doesn't it? Because what are the skills that are required to be a successful exec or senior leader? Well, you've just made a reality, these are, and then the education that comes around that as to the why then follows, and people may be more incentivized actually to educate themselves in that area. But I would say there's something about having that competence, and then there's something about the values that people hold. So you'll have people who don't have a lot of cultural competence maybe, but have a lot of cultural humility, because they just have that psychological openness and are interested in people's stories, and are probably quite anti-racist in their worldview and in their political views, perhaps. That's powerful. And again, I don't think you can teach or even coach that. That is about people's worldview, isn't it? Don't know what that means in terms of what the action would be, but I think again, values-based recruitment, thinking about getting people into positions who are allies, but also who have that sort of that progressive view of leadership, because I think that is incredibly powerful and contagious.
Thank you. That's really smashing. It's so interesting to hear from all three of you guys. You were absolutely wonderful, and I'm sure that the listeners or viewers, whichever way they're consuming this, will agree. I've got to say, until recent years, I didn't know that I was so interested in the topic of diversity because I was just on my own journey. But I think in recent years, this has just become something that I think about, maybe because I've now got children, and that sort of is a bit of a stark reality as to what happens next and so on. So I just wanted to personally thank you guys for speaking up, being here, taking time out of your day to record the podcast and get the messaging out there. But yeah, really wonderful, and thanks to the Caring View for letting me chat.
Thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you, Dan and Nick, Daniel and Nick and Amrit. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.